Aloha, everyone. This is Stephanie with the Whispering Dragonfly coming to you with a sovereignty story. Today, we're going to talk about grief. Okay, so the sovereignty stories are our lessons, initiations that an oracle, a seer, a spiritual initiate goes through in order to become sovereign. We are moving into a time where it is important for the individual to be personally sovereign, meaning that you are embodied completely and able to move through this world and make your choices and decisions as you, embodied as you, regardless of the chaos or regardless of the opinions of others around you, that you are having radical responsibility for self. Okay, we used to think of sovereignty as places or as land to have or as tribal relations, but this is enveloping the tribe and the village within yourself. Okay, so today we're going to talk about grief. Before that, I want to say thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for liking, sharing, subscribing, hitting that bell button. All those things help my channel to grow and expand, and it's free for you to comment and engage, and that's a great way for you to support the channel. And if you're liking what I'm putting out into the world, please do share, because that helps other people be able to access this information. Okay, so grief, a couple of things. I have been through this initiation of grief many, many, many times. It's one of, when you look at, you guys know if you've been watching me for a while, that I do human design readings and delve into that experimentation of human design in my chart. Many of the placements that I have happen to be on letting go of living and dying, transfiguration, rapture, sacrifice. These are all the things that make me radiant and are part of how I inspire the other. I'm here to go to inspiration, right? And to move that gift through me to others. And also, many of those lines are on the realm of accepting death. Okay. So one of my life themes has been, and seems to continue to be, to accept death in many of its different forms, which includes the rebirth, right? Because death is a completion. I am a Capricorn sun in Venus. Capricorn is one of the planets that deals with death. Capricorn is the death of the old self, figuring out your rules, structure, regulation, and it's the constellation before you get to God. So you have to move through the devil in order to have the light, right? And so, as well as my birthday, I'm a King of Diamonds. King of Diamonds is the only one-eyed king in the deck, meaning there is one eye in this world and there's one eye in the other world. And so, so my initiations have been through many, many different deaths and many different griefs, including but not limited to my mother, my grandmothers, my grandfathers. The most recent death that was maybe one of the hardest for me was my kahuna passing. And recently on the periphery, there's a few different people who have made their transition, graduation, or hala, as it's called in Hawaiian, to the spirit world, back to the spirit world, in the last couple of days. So I have found out that there's been a few different people that's been on the peripheral of the community. They're not my close friends, but they're people that I've met and love and have had really beautiful interactions with and been inspired by. And so, so today, I want to talk about grief in multiple forms here, because grief is an initiation. So first and foremost, grief. 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 Grief is how this was downloaded to me, is God resides in everyone fully and forever. God resides in everyone fully and forever. And in that knowing, part of grief's job as its catalyst of completion is to remove any resistances or any illusions of loss. But before it removes that so that you can come to acceptance and completion, it brings up this energy of what you have not been seeing, what you've been attached to, whom you've been attached to. Because remember, attachment is different than love. Love is detachment, non-attachment. Love is full presence. Attachment presupposes that you have something that you want to control or gain from the other person, right? Love is detachment. It's freedom. It's being fully present in the moment is detachment. It's letting go of past and letting go of future and allowing the energy and the beingness one to the other to flow between you. That is when God resides within and without. Okay. What I like to say, I'm in process of writing a book about grief and this process so that you can move through this initiation, maybe in a gentler way, if that's the way, than I did, but having a little bit more information. And I call grief the ravishing. And ravish has two different meanings, okay? And they are opposed to each other, okay? There can be a paradox. Grief is a paradox. While it is a celebration, it does remind you of that there has been a change of form to the individual that we've loved, okay? It's learning, it's grieving and letting go of the perceived loss of the old form and recognizing and accepting in the communication with the new form, okay? So ravish, it means to seize and carry off by force is one of the definitions. Okay, so grief often, okay, so when someone has hollowed, when someone has graduated or passed away, all these different ways of saying how someone makes their transfiguration or transition into a new form. A lot of times we're not prepared for it, or even if we are prepared, it does seem like that person is seized and carried off by force. Now that force can be gentle, that force can be ecstatic, but in the brains of our humanness, we see that as someone being removed by force from us in a negative way, right? The other definition of ravish, excuse me, we have to have some humor, especially when talking about grief, right? Never take yourself too seriously. That was one of the lessons of my kahuna. Okay, ravish. To fill with intense delight in rapture. To fill with intense delight in rapture. So ravish does both. When someone has made their transition, whether expected or unexpected, okay, we can expect it because we're organic and we're human, okay? We will all experience death of the physical form. Our energy will not experience death. We exist, and therefore I am no thing, therefore I create everything, right? And so that part of us that feels like in grief that we have been seized or someone's been carried off from us by force, through the remembering of them, through the grief, through this process of transmutation and us becoming a completely different person, through each of my grieving processes, grief has ravished me completely. It has taken over in the sense of the people being seized or carried off and what I have learned about myself, the transmutation that has occurred in my cells, my DNA. I am a completely different person than I was before my beloveds have made their transition. One of my jobs is to speak to those who have passed, and they are always in ravishing. They are always in intense delight and in rapture. Every single time that I speak to someone who no longer has their physical form, but I'm speaking with their energy or giving a message from them to one of their beloveds who is going through the grieving process. They are always not only at peace, but in extreme delight. Their humor shows up. Some people have had disease or other ways in which they've chosen to make their transition. And so last remembrances of their beloveds often has to do with a sadness, or they were in pain or couldn't talk or what have you. That releases the form that dies, the human body and its restrictions and limitations. That leaves every single person. The light that they're in is ecstasy, love. Even those who have transitioned will say incorrectly or prematurely, those who have taken their own life, or like my mother left because she asked Spirit, I cannot anymore, right? Cannot. Please take me. Now, my mom died by suffocation. So she had a acid reflux. You know, the physical human thing was an acid reflux situation. She passed out, fell forward into her covers, and passed away. She wasn't found for 3 days. Now, this is important because in spiritual law, and you'll see in certain practices, you do not touch the body for 3 days so that the soul can be picked up and put where it needs to be put, right? So even in my mother's way of making that transition, she chose it, and she was alone, but she did it in a way that she was respectful of Spirit and her own soul and spirit, and she really planned that very well. And so what we can know, if you read your own DNA, Akashic records, Kua'iwi Mo'o, which is your spinal cord, you know, maybe unconsciously, but you know when you've chosen to leave this world, okay? When you are complete with your journey in this simulation, okay? Uncle would always say, my kahuna, would always say, it's one movie, monkey. He would call me monkey. It's one movie, okay? Watch the movie. If you don't like it, change the channel. Now, when someone has left their form, we can't necessarily change the channel for them to be back in their physical form that I know of, okay? The Pueo is resurrection, so some have resurrected, so I can't say that that hasn't happened. It has happened in life, okay? So there have been cases, like look at all the near-death experiences. There have been cases where people have died and made that choice to re-up or come back and resurrect. But generally speaking, if someone has made their process and chosen to leave, that they've chosen that their time is complete, you know, we can't really press that rewind button in that way. That being said, the grief process actually will help you to keep things alive. Now, I like the way Brother Keone says it of Pohala Botanicals. He says grief is the juvenile reaction to the illusion of loss. It is the illusion of loss. Okay, grief is the juvenile reaction. That being said, part of grief's purpose and catalyst is to honor that juvenile, right? Because we honor our inner child, we honor our inner juvenile, we honor our inner adult, and we honor our inner elder, okay? And our spirit form. Remember, we are only 20% embodied. So when we're thinking about grieving, while we are in human form, only 20% of our beingness is actually embodied. The other 80% is still in spirit, okay? It is not embodied. This is what we would call our higher self. This is what we would call our highest being, or some people will call it higher soul, somewhat oversoul. Okay, oversoul is a little different, but that can also be an expression of that 80% that is still in spirit. So we are always connected. Now, there are stages to grief. Okay, these have been scientifically studied. There is a pattern to grief. There is a pattern from moving from the illusion of loss and that juvenile aspect to the end of the pattern of acceptance and completion. And so the stages of grief are denial. And they don't necessarily go in linear order. So there is often a denial that this person is not actually gone, that this hasn't actually happened. And we can grieve more than people. We can grieve a relationship that we've ended. Anything that we've been attached to has to have a grieving process. If we haven't actually loved them, and love meaning detachment in the moment, right? We're going to have a grieving process. So there will be denial. The next step is anger. Anger is a very lively energy. While it is a low energy, it's powerful because it says, I want to live. I want to live. I want to, I'm mad about this because I want to live. I want this to be different. Something has been wronged. It's different than apathy. It's different than denial. It's a very strong energy. And it's an energy that says, I am going to live. I'm mad about it right now, but I'm going to live. Then you have bargaining. Okay, and bargaining is, God, if I would, I'll give this much if you'll just bring them back. Or, I'm so sorry. I wish that this would happen. Let me give this in order to have that. It's this trying to make a deal with God, source, universe, higher self to change what has happened, right? Then there's depression. Now, depression is multifold. So in the energy, depression is living in the past. So when we live in the past, the body becomes depressed. Now, the physicality and the energetic system is we have multiple bodies. So we have the egg-shaped aura around us. And then within our abdomen area, we have another egg shape, okay? Now, depression is when that egg shape actually indents in and goes concave. And what happens is it becomes like a vacuum for negative energy, for people to dump their shit on you. Excuse my French, but that's the best way to say it, okay? It becomes a place to harbor emotions and other things because that energy body has been depressed, literally. So it is a physical and energetic depression. And so it takes some earth time to mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, we'll even go to ether here, okay? Press that back out and become convex again, okay? To become egg-shaped again. It takes some time. What that can look like is people will often isolate when they're going through grief. That's been my big trick, okay? How many oracles or seers out there isolate? Let me know in the comments, all right? It is something I am learning to do differently and also accept that is a pattern that happens to be in my form. And so there's depression. And that does take some earth time. As much as energy clearing is instantaneous, it's quantum. Certain things, if they have been done on a linear progression, the energy's clean, but the physical human body, the organic, needs some earth time to move that out. Because once it's in your body, we have to address it in the physical form. Okay, so as much as you can do all of this energy work that you'd like to, if you have something in the physical form, we have to address it in the physical form. Because by the time it gets to the physical form, it's been in your energy field and unaddressed for so long that now it has to manifest into the form, into this plane of existence. And so therefore, we move through it and we address it and complete and transmute the energy through a physical process. So that's depression. And then last but not least, we have acceptance. And this is when we accept that this change has occurred. This can also be known as completion. So there's the steps to completion of grief, that completion of that transition. Now, acceptance is, I have been made aware of lack or loss, or where I've been attached to this beloved that has moved on into their spirit form. And while I celebrate them, I am accepting that I also have these things going on, and I get to feel these things. I get to experience this, okay? There's something to be said about being so connected to someone that you notice their loss, that you notice their change of form. It's really okay. You can celebrate that. And as I've recently been going through a transition and moving through these next stages, okay, I've been moving from depression to acceptance. And as I'm moving into acceptance, I talked to my mentor because I was not having levity, okay? I was really feeling strongly the, we'll call darker or negative emotions and depression. And she said, Stephanie, the spirit is not levity all the time, because that would be out of balance. She said, these feelings and emotions that you're having are another expression of God. You are just learning and embodying the other side of God. So we don't make those feelings that are running through, the emotions, the energy in motion, okay? We don't make them wrong. We understand that we are experiencing another side of God, and the levity will come. It will come through acceptance. It will come through that rebirth, okay? The other planet that we'll say that has to do with death is Pluto, and that rules Scorpio. Okay, Uncle would call Scorpios the anglerfish, the deep divers of the water, okay, in the dark. Pluto's also associated with Hades, okay, the underworld, death and rebirth. Its other symbol is the phoenix. And the phoenix burns itself and rebirths itself through its own ashes. Okay. And this is the cycle. And we just so happen to have Pluto in Capricorn for its last time. Okay. So these energies of death and rebirth, the last time in our lifetime, we're a few hundred, almost like, what was it? 250, 275. My astrologers, let me know in the comments. We have many years before this comes back again. So likely not in our lifetime, unless you guys learn how to live 250 years or something. Great. But likely not in my lifetime. I haven't figured that one out yet. So there is a collective death and rebirth that's happening. And many people are choosing to leave their physical form and move into spirit. Now, one of the things that has come to me while Uncle was still living and I was being his caregiver, I had just done the laundry, so things were clean, right? And I was bringing that back to the heiau, and I looked at the mountain, because part of my job was always to look at the mountain, look at the weather, to see the patterns, see the faces or people or beings that might be in them, and give that information back to my kahuna, because then he would know what to do with it. And so I was driving towards the mountain, and I had goosebumps all over, chicken skin, whatever you want to call that. And then I saw the vision, and Spirit said to me, I saw all this light pouring in through me, top down, all around. And they said, Stephanie, we never lose anyone. The light that your loved ones go into is your physical light of existence. It's the same. And so our Amakua, our ancestors, our beloveds, they live in our light, in that life force energy, in the light that we are. Uncle would say, I'll meet you on the beam, okay? Because when you're in your light body, we are all together. We are all one. And I keep hearing that Fleetwood Mac song, like, I want to be with you everywhere. Ooh, and I do not own the rights to that song. I just am laughing because it's like I keep hearing that, you know. And this morning I was watching something, and that's what alerted me to making this video, because I saw that one of our community members had made his transition, his HAWAIIAN. And so, yeah, so that's what I have for grief so far, okay? And what I want to say is love your inner juvenile as you're moving through this process, because maybe you had fantastic parents, but I'd like to say, you know, most of the people who watch my channel are what we would call healers or balancers or light workers or seers, you know, whatever your term is for what your gifts are here on the planet. But I have gifted people who watch my videos, and that typically comes with lessons and harder childhoods, because remember, wisdom delves from experience, not information. Knowledge comes from information, right? Wisdom comes from information and action through experiential living. And that's part of the initiation, even with grief, right? When I was first starting out with Uncle, I'll tell this story, and then I think we'll be complete for this session of grief. I wasn't living in Hawaii yet, and Uncle came to me in meditation. I had just come back, I think, from my second trip to Kauai to work with him, and he came to me in a meditation, and we were standing on a beach in Kauai in the meditation with him and my mentor. And he looked at my mentor and said, "She's ready." And my mentor said, "No, she's not." And he growled at her. They were both dogs in Chinese astrology, yeah? So he growled at her and said, "She's ready." And my mentor put her hands up in the meditation and said, "Okay." And Uncle looked at me and he said, he put a black cloak around me and him, dark as night, like being in space, and said, "I'm going to become everything you fear. And you step into it and become it. And then you step out and I'll move to the next one." And I said, "Okay." And he proceeded for 45 minutes to become everything I could fear. And I had to step in and become it and step out. Step in and become it and step out. Step in and become it and step out. And in becoming, it's feeling every single emotion, becoming that emotion, feeling every single fear, allowing everything in the body to move through and become that which I feared. And then when it was complete, he said, "Okay, now take your first flight." And I shape-shifted into Pueo, and I took my first flight. Okay, so now you guys may see why I call it Pueo Organics for my business. But grief is a method by which you are transformed and by which you embody your fears, one of them being loss, right? I have a little bit of tears wanting to come up right now, just remembering that experience, but it will shapeshift you. It will allow you to become a completely different person and an upgraded version of yourself. That's the beautiful thing about grief. If you let it ravish you, if you let it take something by force that was no longer useful to you, okay, that sense of loss, that sense of attachment is the thing that's going. It's not that you're beloved. Your beloved is not the thing that's going. They are always with you. It is the part that is completely attached to the other. That's being taken by force and turned into sheer and utter delight, enrapturement, ecstasy. Okay? And only grief can do that. There's many other things that can get you to ecstasy, but in this particular situation, the only way to go from the juvenile to the elder, to the acceptance, to the completion, is to go through that process and allow it to become celebration. Okay? So you guys, I love you so much. Hopefully this helps you to understand the process by which you're going through in grief. I do help people to move into their sovereignty who have been grieving or who have had childhood traumatic experiences. So if you would like a session with me, that information is in the description box below. Just email me, let me know, hey, I'd like to work with you, and we will we'll set up a session together. Okay. I love you guys. Love you, love you, love you. I feel you. I see you. I hear you. I know that this process seems a little daunting, but it's actually one of the most beautiful processes that you can move through. And I'm excited to see who you are being on the other side of this upgrade. Okay. Until next time. Aloha.